This is an incredible conference already, and it's not even finished. And I hope that many, many, many more of these happen in more than just this city. They happen in many other cities because this is the only place that's actually colliding this concept of entrepreneurship and faith. And it's something that I live every day, and it's very, very close to me. Before I was an entrepreneur, long before I was an entrepreneur, I actually guided expeditions in the wilderness, like the actual wilderness. This is a wilderness too. I took kids in. It was all boys. It was this Christian wilderness camp called Deerfoot. And that's another talk, but it changed my life forever. And in the beginning of those experiences, the wilderness was hard. It was challenging. It overwhelmed me at times. I was hailed on. I was bitten by things. I had snakes and bugs crawling over my face when I'd wake up in the morning because we'd be sleeping under the stars. And before even guiding, I was a student. I had to arrive at being a guide. And when I was a student, I went through a very incredible experience, an experience that I did not ask for, an experience that I was led towards. And it was this opportunity at Deerfoot that we call the guide program. And I was being taught how to be a leader. I was being taught how to be a wilderness guide. And so what they did is they took us on a 10-day excursion canoeing the Algonquin Park in Canada. It was the farthest, the deepest wilderness I've ever been in my life. At the middle of the trip, 5 days in from anything, a 5-day canoe from absolutely anything, we were each taken and dropped on an island by ourselves. We were left with nothing but a plastic about 5 feet by 3 feet wide, 3 arm lengths of twine, 5 matches, a Bible, a book, a notepad, and a single Nalgene of water and a sleeping bag. 3 days, 3 nights. I was 17. Those 3 days proceeded to change the way I think about life, even as I stand here right now. I was challenged. I was burdened. I was scared to death. Because the thing that scares me the most is loneliness. And I was alone, so I thought. For 3 days and 3 nights, I didn't utter a single audible word. I wrote in my journal, I read the Bible, I sat and actually read Ecclesiastes front to back without ever stopping. I don't know if you've ever done that, it's a pretty incredible experience. But if you're on an island, you have nothing to do, it's actually helpful. I had no idea what it was teaching me, the lessons I was receiving for the future that I would ultimately fall into. When I left that 3 days and I was brought back, and my guide leader, who's still a mentor of mine to this day, asked me, among many things of debriefing, he said, "Where do you think you'll be in 5 years after that experience you just had?" I had no idea. I don't know what I'm going to do in 5 years. I just was by myself for 3 days and I didn't eat. By the way, I fasted for 3 days too. I had no food. But I experienced God on that. I experienced real joy by the end of those 3 days. Every night I'd sit down at this rocky shore and I'd watch the sunset. And I would just think. I didn't have an epiphany. I didn't have this mantra I would go through. I would just create space. That was it. To my amazement, 5 years later, to the day, I was that guide leader. I was taking these kids on their 3-day experience we called a solo. To my incredible amazement, it was even harder than being on my island, to give these guys their island, to prepare their minds and their spirits for what they're going to experience, the challenges that they're going to face, the unknown. I don't even know every detail of what they're going to experience. I can only prepare them with enough tools to keep their ears open, their eyes open, and hopefully their hearts. But if they're closed, most likely they'll be open by the end of those 3 days. That set me on a course. It set me on a course that also created in me a choice for the very first time that I chose God for me. I grew up in a Christian home, but this time it was my decision. And it was because I was experiencing wilderness. I was experiencing wilderness because it was the first thing that I had encountered that man had nothing to do with. I couldn't deny that this wasn't us that did it. That's what sold it for me. I was like, this is it. I believe in Jesus. And it also made me profoundly interested in creation. And it's what, in fact, that I chose as a major in college. I moved on and I was like, I want to do science. I want to study the environment. I want to understand this amazing thing. Now, you need to know that right before I actually went into the sciences in college, I was actually a business major. I sucked at it. I'm like, seriously, I was not good. Solid C's. Accounting is like what broke my back. I'd like worked my butt off and I only got a C+. I'm like, that's it. I'm done. But I took a single botany class, and I remembered that island. I remembered that creation, the thing that I had nothing to do with, the thing that I deeply wanted to understand, that enticed me. So I made it a minor, and about a week later, I made it a major. I was a year deep, so I had to go like a 5-year, I was like a 5th-year senior. We called it, with a bunch of my buddies, we were all 5th-year seniors, we called it a victory lap. One more. I chose science because I didn't want to start a business. You see, I'm a 3rd-generation entrepreneur now. My dad, hi Dad, he's here, runs an amazing construction company, extremely successful. His father, my grandfather, had a trucking logistics company, extremely successful. I knew what entrepreneurship took. I knew the challenge. My dad had an office in the garage, an office in the basement. He worked his tail off. He provided for us. I had my college paid for because of him. But I didn't like the business of business. And so I chose science. I want to be outside. I want to be back on that island. I didn't want to start a business. So I went on. I pursued my undergrad in botany. I went into graduate school for environmental science where I focused on water quality, drinking water. I was really excited about drinking water because it has everything to do with plants and it's the sciences and how this whole water system works. And I got through grad school, which was incredibly difficult. It was intense. But I got to this amazing point where I had to decide a master's thesis, my research. What's my ultimate research going to be? And I had one opportunity that I made what some might say a very stupid decision about, is the federal EPA offered these things called traineeships. And this traineeship was paid for, funded. You had a salary, and you worked, and that work became your master's. It was great. It was this awesome thing. The only problem is I wasn't in the wilderness. I was in a lab, and I'd been in labs before, and I didn't want to be a lab rat. And so I just turned it down, to my amazement. And I turned it down, but then 3 more months went by with nothing. I couldn't find any funding. I couldn't find anything. And I felt like I was doomed to not graduate because my friends were getting further along in their graduation. One guy actually took that traineeship, and he was moving really well. But then something amazing came. A good friend of mine, Josh, was looking at this book, and it was a book of all these countries around the world, and we saw one that we had never, ever had seen the word before. And it was this place called Comoros. And what was so cool about it scientifically, for me, a water quality guy, was it had no surface water, and it 100% depended on rainwater for all their needs. I was going down the path of rainwater. 6 months later, I landed in this island that I never knew existed. Just like that island I didn't know existed on that canoe trip. So I'm there, I'm getting to experience these people that rely on rainwater, and that's all they have. They have nothing else. And I was simply there to help them. I simply wanted to be a part of the solution. I think it was the second sample I ever took. We're standing there, I had these instruments and these probes, and when we arrived to the village, we had a translator, and the village proceeds to descend upon our truck. It was like a truck full of white guys, and it's pretty weird. And they come out, and it was very eerie, because I wasn't sure that they were going to allow us to be in this village. We finally convinced them that we're there to help. And so once they understand that, they want to help us. They want to be a part of it. So they follow us everywhere. They're putting on the latex gloves. They want to touch the instruments. They want to collect the samples. We had people from another window shouting, come to our house next, do ours. And so I get ready to do my first sample in this village. And I take it, I pull it, I put it in the probe, and it's just one parameter, just a fundamental water quality parameter. And it was incredibly good. It was better than the tap water many of you are drinking right now. Doesn't mean it was healthy, but in this one attribute, it was incredibly good. Blew my mind. And I'm sitting there thinking about this, trying to figure out why this is happening. And there's a Comoran next to me that's actually holding the instrument. He's holding the button. And he says, "Maji say bon? Is the water good? Maji say bon?" I don't, I know there's more to this. I'm only looking at one thing. And I had nothing else to say, but I turn and I say, "Maji say bon?" He proceeds to turn around, and you need to know that there was about 50 people. There was an entourage following us. He turned around and says, "Maji say bon?" And they start dancing and singing and laughing. And like Josh, who was there, he was there to just take pictures and photography. I have no pictures of this because he was dancing with them. I swear it happened. No, I have no proof though. It was the most incredible experience of my life. I felt like I was on a National Geographic special. But what I realized as I started to break it down in my head after that is it was really profound. They knew that they couldn't trust their water. I wasn't telling them anything profound. They already distrusted it. And they didn't want to be a part of something that I would just hand them some magic water widget that would fix all their issues and say, "Hey, I have assessed your problem. I went back to the US, I got in the lab, I thought about it, I created this nice little thing, and I brought it back, and here you go, you're great. Peace. I'm gonna go have a party later." They wanted to be a part of the journey to that solution. Because they proceeded to follow me for the remainder of that day, which was a 13-hour day of sampling. They followed us everywhere. They were so excited. It blew my mind, and it shaped the way I thought about what I'm doing. What am I offering? Am I giving something of value? Instead of something, I was giving them an opportunity. I didn't even realize that. I stepped into it again. An opportunity to be a part of a solution, to be a part of something good, something they already distrusted. When I got back, I presented my proposal defense to my committee. Pretty typical stuff. My first act of entrepreneurship was I had this idea that what I did out there, collecting data, and I'll have you know that data I collected, I did it all on an iPad. It's a little thing that I kind of cobbled together. And the reason I don't bleed that into the story, it was the most smallest portion of my research. It was the least of my worries. It was nice. It worked. But it didn't matter that much. What mattered was that experience. I came back, and I was like, man, this thing is cool. It worked. It really helped me. I wanted to help other people's research because everyone was really interested in that little iPad thing for data collection. It was just data collection. And they wanted to have it, and they wanted to know, how did I do that? How was my methodology? Could you help me with my research in doing the same thing? And so I had this thought of man, what if I could just give this thing away? I mean, I just kind of fell into it, but here, just take it. And so I presented this thought. Really, it was just an experience at the tail end of my proposal defense. That was my act of entrepreneurship. I just stole the last 5 minutes, and I pitched. And the most amazing thing was said to me by my advisor. She said that the point of graduate school, the point of going in for higher education is to master something. And you take that mastery and you give back to the community of which you learned it. So the sciences, give back to the community of the sciences. With this thing you're doing, that's exactly what's happening. So go do that. Amazingly, she encouraged me to put my master's on hold and pursue this thing I called liquid. And I'm standing here today, still pursuing it. And people are now using it. I never asked for it. I didn't go to college to start a business. Later on, we're building the company. I bring on a co-founder who was there from the beginning, Caleb, my wife, who I cannot do this without because she supported me. She chose to say, hey, I will start working full-time because I believe in this so much. She's a scientist too. She got it. Caleb came on. We started growing. We started building. We got into an accelerator. We kept moving. people found what we were doing, we were not even marketing it. We were doing a terrible job at marketing it. And people kept coming in. Scientists, the most coolest people I've ever met in my life, are saying, hey, I'm helping these people too around the globe. I just need a little bit of a better piece. That's why I do this. But as you build a company, as things kind of build up, this was, again, something I hadn't understood, but more and more things were mounting up. More and more things were mounting up. And I was getting stressed. I was getting overwhelmed. I was about to explode. And recently, I had an absolute mental breakdown. We stepped out of the office with my co-founder, Caleb, and I proceeded to weep. I wept like a child. And he asked, are you okay? What's wrong? I didn't know what was okay because I was experiencing every single emotion in one fell swoop because I had suppressed every single emotion up to that point. Because I was just trying to make everyone happy. I wanted to experience what I saw in Comoros. Again, I wanted to apply that to others. I wasn't addressing the way that I was feeling. I mentioned that this was recently. It was on Tuesday. I learned something very powerful in that experience. There was a voice in my head, and it was cunning, and it was tender. And that really freaked me out, how tender it was. The voice was saying, you're not cut out for this.
Whoa.
Do you feel it now? Is that I couldn't have been more perfect. I don't know. You can't, unpolished, you can't plan this stuff. That tender voice, that cunning, tender voice said, you're not cut out for this. Caleb tells me a story from the Chronicles of Narnia, where Eustace, a boy who's greedy and seeks comfort, turns into a dragon overnight because the comforts take the best of him. Aslan comes up to him and he sees his pain because he's trying to tear the flesh from his own body, but he can't get rid of it. He can't get the scales off. And Aslan says, do you want to be a boy again? And Eustace, in so many words, is afraid that it's going to hurt. Of course it's going to hurt, but it's worth it. Aslan tears into his flesh with his claws, rips it to pieces. He's bleeding, he's painful. He feels that the claws are going as deep to his heart. That's how I felt on Tuesday. It was all coming out. I couldn't contain it anymore. I felt embarrassed that I was even crying. And I mentioned to Caleb, I'm not cut out for this. I'm not cut out for this. Caleb says, you're being cut out for this. When I was a guide leader, we were in that canoe trip. We would take guys and we would have them be a leader for the day. We wanted to challenge them to be the leaders of this pack, this organization. We would trade. Each day would be a new leader. And we would give them the map. We'd say, hey, we're here. We need to get here. Everything in between is your decision. When we eat, where we eat, what happens, who cooks, everything. And we would literally stay, and if we knew that we were going in the wrong direction, which I knew sometimes, we would just let it happen. And the leader would be like, is this right? You're the leader. But it would challenge them to make decisions for themselves. They had no choice. And the best part is they had to make a decision for a group of people that depended on them. And they failed. They failed a lot. But what was interesting is I tried to get everyone be a leader for the day. And in one group, I had a guy at the very end of the trip, he realized that he was never a leader for the day. And I'll have you know that this guy was the best leader in our group. He killed it. The guy was amazing at organizing this group of people. All the other guys respected him. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, Jacob, I wasn't a leader, and like, we're done. Like, can I be a leader? And I said, Dave, you're already a great leader, but you're a bad follower. I wanted you to learn how to follow. Literally, his eyes like opened up. Oh my gosh, I had no idea. Real joy, real life is when you submit control. Leadership is often taught as control and predict. To follow is to submit, and sometimes we need to learn how to follow, even when it's not our choice. I got comfortable in the wilderness, the actual wilderness, because I grew there. It challenged me. I found myself. But I was called out of that wilderness and into entrepreneurship, a thing I didn't want to do. This is my new wilderness. And it's hard. And I break down. Find your wilderness. It may not be entrepreneurship. It may be. But know that the first step is actually not the hardest. I deny that. I think it's the easiest. The hardest step is the next one, is the one that keeps you in the wilderness. And maybe the one that takes you to the next wilderness. Thank you.